Europa Park is an absolutely massive theme park resort located in Rust, Germany. The park is known for its world-class themed areas and dark rides, as well as its 13 roller coasters. Now, I will warn you guys that most of this park's attractions do cater towards families, and therefore they don't have the most thrilling rides and coasters in the world. And of the ones that do pack in the thrills, there are clearly some noticeable flaws. But that's why I'm here with my list of the top 15 rides and attractions at Europa Park. Before we get into it, I do want to make you aware that I'm only featuring rides that I've personally ridden. I spent 2 days at Europa Park this past summer and was able to get on each of their 13 coasters as well as 4 dark rides. This includes Pirates in Batavia, Volatarium, Geisterschloss, and Abenteuer Atlantis. I'm sure there's like 30 other dark rides that could have made this list, but between the fact that I didn't know how to find a lot of them and because I didn't exactly know which ones I should have prioritized, I walked away with just those 4. I also didn't get on the park's River Rapids ride, which looked really fun. I'm sure that could have made it on here as well. Now, before we get into my top 15, I do want to give a shout out to the park's 14th roller coaster set to debut in 2024. This is rumored to be called Voltron and will be a Mock Rides Big Dipper coaster themed to electricity. This is absolutely a great fit for this park because in my opinion, they don't have the quantity of high quality thrill coasters that they probably should. I highly anticipate this ride to be the second best coaster in the park, maybe even first if we're lucky. Anyways, let's get into my own top 15 rides and attractions at Europa Park. Starting off this list at number 15 is Schweizer Bobbin. This Mock Rides bobsled coaster opened in 1985, making it the park's oldest operating roller coaster. But you really wouldn't be able to tell because this is a super unique, innovative ride. The bobsled coaster is a peculiar concept, but a fun one for sure. Europa Parks can be found in their Swiss-themed section, and it is absolutely a family attraction. Definitely not a super thrilling ride and not a super long ride either. But I do appreciate this one for what it's worth, and it gets bonus points for being such a rarity in the coaster world. Number 14 is Pegasus, another Mock Rides coaster, which, spoiler alert, I should also mention that most of the rides in this park were manufactured by Mock Rides. Why? Because they own the park. Anyways, Pegasus is a pretty cool family coaster with some zippy transitions and fun elements. It's one of those super rare Youngstar models, of which the only other one I'd ridden before this is Flight of the Hippogriff at Universal Studios Hollywood. You could definitely feel the similarities between the two as they're both smooth, relatively tame but fun coasters overall. Number 13, Alpen Express Enzian. This Mock Rides powered coaster is arguably one of the tamest coasters in the park, considering its height of under 20 feet and max speed of 28 miles per hour. It also happens to be a clone of Groton Blitz at Haida Park, but honestly you'd never be able to tell. Alpen Express for the most part is just an ordinary powered roller coaster, until you reach the enclosed building in which there are all sorts of statues, animatronics, dark ride shenanigans, and the list goes on. I kid you not, this building serves as a walkthrough attraction, which I did get to experience, and it was by far one of the coolest things I got to see while visiting Europa Park. The coaster ranks above the prior two because seeing this for the first time really surprised me, and I wouldn't have found the walkthrough attraction without riding it. At number 12 is Abenteuer Atlantis. This is just one of Europa Park's 7 million different dark rides that are just tucked away in random sections of the park. In the case of this ride, all I can remember seeing was this tiny little entrance sign and a spiral staircase that took me underground. There, I was greeted by a cute shooting dark ride with some really well done animatronics. Though I'm not normally a fan of shooting dark rides, this one had some elaborately themed set pieces that had me put my gun down and just appreciate the theming. That's not something I usually do, but the theming here really impressed me. At number 11 is Atlantica Super Splash. One of 2 water coasters at this park, Atlantica Super Splash fits its namesake and is classified as a Super Splash coaster model. The only other one I've ever seen was Journey to Atlantis at SeaWorld San Antonio, which wasn't open during my visit in late 2020. At the time, I didn't really care too much because the ride looked like it didn't do a whole lot. And while I stand true to that statement and don't care a whole lot that I missed the coaster credit, I did have more fun than I expected on this one at Europa Park. The Super Splash model is characterized by 2 turntable sections, first rotating you backwards down a little coaster dip and then forwards down a larger flume drop. Atlantica Super Splash also tacks on an additional speed hill which added to the drop sequence as well. This was a really refreshing and fun plunge into the water, even if it's just about the only element this ride features. Making the top 10 is Euromir. I'm sorry if this spot disappoints some of you guys because I know Euromir has this weird fandom of people that can't get enough of this thing. I didn't get it at all. I thought Euromir was so dumb. Yet somehow the stupidness of this coaster kept me coming back for more. Every time I rode Euromir, I would constantly ask myself what I just experienced. There's like a 15-minute long spiral lift hill in pitch darkness where the only thing happening is this incredibly loud, upbeat soundtrack blaring in your ears. Then when you get to the top, you go through all of these flat, unbanked turns that don't really serve a purpose other than to give a view of the park. And the whole time you're rotating around these mirrored buildings, and I literally have no idea what these are doing here. The ride does get relatively exciting once you reach the actual prime ride time because your train flips around and has these super cool forwards and backwards rotations. However, the caveat is that Euromir is also pretty rough, so it can only be so enjoyable in the end. Number 9 is Poseidon. Europa Park's best water ride is a super long Mock Rides water coaster with some great theming actually. You have this Greek-inspired architecture making up the station building, and the ride visually looks great. There are 2 lift hills dividing the 2 halves of the ride, the first of which is where most of the coaster stuff takes place, and the second mainly focusing on the final drop and that speed hill into the water. It's another one where I don't exactly know what the ride is trying to accomplish, but it's a fun water coaster, so I suppose it doesn't really matter. At number 8 is Geisterschloss. The best way I'd describe this dark ride is if you took Haunted Mansion at Disneyland and made it PG-13. It has the same general idea, same dune buggy vehicles, and many similar scenes to the original, yet everything is so much more explicit. Geisterschloss may have been one of the only rides where I even came off feeling a little unsettled. I was surprised that it was able to accomplish that because no other attraction I'd ever ridden had given me that exact feeling. So in that regard, I was certainly impressed by this dark ride. Number 7, Eurosat Can-Can Coaster. Located in the French section of the park, this indoor family coaster can be found in what I like to call Europa Park's Epcot Ball. No, seriously, it was even made by the exact same company. Instead of a slow-moving dark ride like in Florida though, they decided to put a roller coaster in this one. It used to be known as just Eurosat from 1989 to 2017, but since 2018 it has reopened under a huge overhaul. I know a lot of people that held nostalgic value to the original were upset about the change, but since I never got to experience the old version of the ride, I have nothing to compare it to. Perhaps that's the reason I got off thinking this was one of the top 5 coasters in the park. It reminds me a fair bit of Space Mountain at Disneyland considering how smooth it is and the fact that you can't really see too much throughout the ride. But you will still pass by some theming like the Eiffel Tower during the Spiral Lift Hill and the French Can-Can that the ride is named after. It's actually pretty hilarious when you slam into the brake run after a mostly pitch dark experience and then see all of these women doing the Can-Can right in front of your eyes. Trust me, it's as weird as it sounds, but not the weirdest thing I saw at Europa Park. Perhaps that would have to go to the number 6 spot on this list, Arthur. I would have a field day trying to explain this ride to you guys, but here's the thing, I still have no idea what the heck I rode. This is an inverted powered coaster of some sorts with actually an incredible amount of theming. I'd actually make an argument that Arthur is more dark ride than roller coaster. There are a few points where it heads outdoors through a few fun turns, but for the most part, you just have a lot of these weird looking creatures and animatronics that I guess are accumulating a plot line. This was all hilarious to me because not only can I not understand German, but these characters talk like the grasshoppers from A Bug's Life. I did not know what was happening the entire time, but to me, that made it a really awesome experience. Number 5, Voletarium. One of the park's best dark rides is a beautiful flying theater attraction, which like the park's other dark rides can be relatively easy to miss. As you're entering the park, take your first left. It'll be right there, maybe 20 steps from the main entrance. It was fittingly the first attraction I got to experience at Europa Park, and to be fair, it was actually a pretty good first impression. The entire queue line is absolutely amazing, and then the main ride is like a European reenactment of soaring around the world at the Disney parks. Now unfortunately, I can't show what the ride experience actually looks like because Europa Park will copyright me if I do that. But hopefully this persuades you guys to give it a ride if you happen to be visiting this park for the very first time. Number 4, Silver Star. Our first thrill coaster on this list is a massive B&M hypercoaster and only one of 2 coasters here not manufactured by Mock Rides. Silver Star is Germany's tallest roller coaster, standing 239.5 feet tall, literally the exact same to the decimal as the Schwarzkärchen at Hansa Park up north. But unfortunately, the ride doesn't really live up to its stats, and it certainly isn't anywhere close to the elite status of the Schwarzkärchen. Now, I'm normally a pretty big fan of B&M hypercoasters. I usually get off feeling pretty satisfied. However, I was disappointed to learn that Silver Star was one of the weakest ones. I'm not exactly sure what it is that made me feel this way, because from off-ride, the layout looks like it should be great. And actually, let me preface that while the first half is pretty dull in my opinion, everything post-mid-course brake run is actually really outstanding. It's only a handful of elements, but if you're in the back row, everything at the end of the ride is on par with the best elements on my favorite B&M hypercoaster, Goliath at Six Flags Over Georgia. No joke, if all of Silver Star ran like it does in the second half, it would by far be one of the best hypercoasters in the entire world. But for some reason, the first half heavily missed the mark and offers very light forces in my opinion. At number 3 is Blue Fire Mega Coaster. Despite the name, Blue Fire is not a mega coaster, it's actually a mock launch coaster. The ride has always been a little controversial amongst roller coaster enthusiasts because maybe it's not as good as some other mock launch coasters, or because the launch is forceless, or because the layout is boring, you get the point. Now, I will admit, Blue Fire is not a standout attraction relative to the other mock launch coasters I've ridden, but on its own, I think this coaster is fairly underrated. It's true that the launch doesn't do very much, but everything after that is a ton of fun. There's a nice blend of airtime, hang time, and positive of forces scattered pretty much evenly throughout the layout. It actually reminds me a lot of another German launch coaster I rode called Star Trek Operation Enterprise at Movie Park. Both rides have a perfectly diverse layout but don't exactly stand out in any of the forces. In my opinion though, Blue Fire has one element that shoots it way up in my rankings compared to where it would be otherwise. The final Heartline roll at the end is profiled in such a way that it feels like a miniature Mosasaurus roll from Velocicoaster. It's an absolute banger of a way to end out a solid coaster that I think deserves more respect in the coaster community. At number 2 is Puritan in Batavia. Europa Park's best dark ride was an absolutely spectacular experience. It's essentially the park's take on Pirates of the Caribbean at the Disney parks, but with some spice thrown in there. Now, in my opinion, it still can't touch the OG Pirates at Disneyland, but it is comparable to the one at Magic Kingdom and stands out incredibly well on its own. All of the different scenes, animatronics, scents, and theming were all so wonderful and made this a must-ride experience while at the park. With that being said, there was absolutely no doubt that Vote Timber Coaster is Europa Park's best attraction. I was blown away by this GCI Wood coaster, which is easily the park's most intense roller coaster. Vote was flying during my 2 days at the park, and a local friend I rode this with said it was running better this year than it has in forever. The ride's layout is absolutely incredible, the pacing is perfection, and even the theming is well done in the queue line. Now, as much as I love Vote Timber Coaster, I do have to say, for a park that's been voted the best in the world by the Golden Ticket Awards, it's not really an appropriate standout attraction. If Europa Park is owned by Mach Rides and they love adding in their own coaster models, they could easily add in an extreme spinning coaster like Ride to Happiness at Plopsaland in Belgium. For those of you who've been keeping up with the channel, you'll know that this coaster recently became my absolute favorite roller coaster I've ever ridden. It has everything from a world-class layout, perfect variety of elements, great theming, comfortable free restraints, and a heart-pumping onboard soundtrack. All of these things are exactly the recipe for a true standout coaster for Europa Park. I know we're getting Voltron soon and that's going to be a step in the right direction, but if you really want an attraction that'll leave guests in awe, invest in an extreme spinning coaster. But anyways, I'm getting carried away. Thank you all so much for watching today's video. Let me know if you agree with my rankings or if you change up anything in the comment section below. Also, if you could do me the favor of dropping a like and subscribing to the channel, that would really help me out against the YouTube algorithm. Until next time, I'll see you all in a future video. Bye guys.